I would like to introduce our keynote speaker. He comes to us today from the great state of Georgia. Mr. Patrick Wallace is a former German teacher of 23 years who now works for the Georgia Department of Education as a program specialist for world languages and the global workforce initiatives. In this role, Mr. Wallace oversees programs such as the Georgia Seal of Biliteracy, the International Skills Diploma Seal, and the Dual Language Immersion Initiative. Additionally, he works with numerous consulates as well as state and city organizations in the support of language-related projects. He's a two-time Teacher of the Year and was the State German Teacher of the Year in 2013. Mr. Wallace authored the article, Building a Globally Competent and Competitive Workforce for Today and Tomorrow's World, that was published in the most recent edition of The Language Educator. In addition, Mr. Wallace is a social media marketer and serves on the board of a variety of global education and nonprofit organizations. MFLA was deeply saddened that we were not able to welcome him to our beautiful Eastern Shore last spring, but we are incredibly grateful for his willingness to be here with us today. So without further ado, I would like to present to you Mr. Patrick Wallace as our keynote speaker. Mr. Wallace, and I'm going to stop sharing so that he may.
Okay, everyone, thank you so much. I believe we've made the transition, so I'm hopeful that everybody can hear me okay. I think so. Great. Well, I'm excited to be here today. It is a great honor and pleasure to connect with all of you. I'm a little saddened that because of COVID, I couldn't come to visit you. I've been to the Delmarva a few occasions and was looking forward to going back, but I realized we are adapting. That's what teachers do. We adapt. So I'm incredibly honored and incredibly glad to be able to connect with all of you today. As you can see, as they mentioned, I am the state supervisor for world languages and global workforce initiatives for the Georgia Department of Education. Georgia, just to give you a little bit of a grounding, is the 6th largest school system in the nation. We serve a little over 1.6 million students across the state. So just as a little background, I do want to say a big hello to all of our friends up in Maryland. We are connected, and that's something we've never forgotten in Georgia. You know, we talk about building synergy, about being connected, about working together. And of course, that's true not only within our state, but interstate as well. And so today, I'm just going to bring you a little message from the work that I've been doing in Georgia, and we'll talk about some things there. I did want to just share my contact information with you ahead of time. Of course, that will be available as well. I'm easy to find. I always say just Google Georgia Department of Ed World Languages. You're bound to find our contact information. I am active on Facebook and Twitter, among others. This is a photo that I love taking. I took kids overseas to Germany on several trips. And this was one of our get-togethers in Germany with my kids and the German kids. So I always reflect on my 22 years in the classroom whenever I'm working at the state level. That really helps me to stay connected and collaborate well with our teachers across the state. But again, super easy to reach out to. If you have questions or anything you want to follow up on, please reach out to me after today. Of course, 30 minutes is not a great amount of time, but I did want to share, as I am the Vice President for the National Council for State Supervisors of Foreign Language, I did want to give a shout out to your Susan there in Maryland and State Supervisor of the Year for 2019. So I definitely wanted to recognize her, as well as Bonnie and Betsy and others there in the state of Maryland that are doing a great job. Necessful. Not every one of our states has a state supervisor of foreign language. That is, I always say my secret goal is to, of course, influence the states around me, particularly to the west, north, and south, to get state supervisors of foreign language, because I do, having now done this position for 3 years, I understand the role they play and the importance of having a voice in the state Department of Ed for yourselves for advocating. I did want to also give we do a number of online, we have transitioned totally online, just as you guys are transitioning online. And we do a dual language immersion conference every year. We call it the Georgia Dual Language Immersion uh, initiative. And basically, we had a great keynote speaker, Dr. Sonia Soltera, come and speak. And she shared this slide, and I asked her if I could share it again today, just to kind of let you know that it's very important you take care of yourselves. We know how incredibly important the work you do is. Being a teacher myself, I understand that. I am now married as well to a foreign language teacher. She's a Spanish teacher, so we're keeping it all in the family, as it were. But definitely, it's very important that we take time for ourselves here. And just think about. I'm really worried, honestly, about our teacher corps in the United States, and of course, no more so in world languages, where, we've typically struggled to find teachers and to build that pipeline. That's a big part of the work I do in Georgia. But I just wanted you to know, just please take care of yourselves, find that comfortable pace at which you work. You're under a lot of different pressures at the moment, dealing with your own personal issues, as well as trying to protect and do things for your students as well, and often asked to do both at one time. So we're incredibly, I think our teacher corps is stressed right now. And so I definitely just wanted to send you a message to please take care of yourself. Remember to do some of these things on this list that are helpful, what you can, but be willing to adapt. Take one thing at a time. Remember, less is more. I often make lists, try to take breaks, have realistic self-expectations of yourself, find joy. Don't forget your joy. That's why you entered teaching. So definitely don't want to, that's your engine that drives you. So don't lose your joy amidst all of the things that you are now being asked to do. So just take care of yourself, I guess, is my message first and foremost this morning. So I often start with this picture. I don't know if y'all recognize that. Of course, you'd say that's the Earth, but it's actually a very famous photo called the Blue Marble, taken from the Apollo 17 spacecraft in 1972, when it was about 11,000 miles from Earth. So it was a photo that was taken quite unscripted by one of the astronauts there. And it was the last time that a human being had been that far from Earth, even today, since 1972. No man spacecraft has been this far from Earth. But he took this photo, and I always start with that photo because I think it reminds us that while we are in these incredibly complex worlds, we are in Maryland or Georgia or wherever, we are part of this really delicate globe called Earth that is sort of revolving in the universe. So I think it also gives us a great perspective, because tendencies among us here sometimes is to think about our work as our work and not the others, but we truly all are in this same boat together, as Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. would say, of course, from Atlanta as well. So definitely always start with that. A lot of cases, just to remind people that this is the world we live in, that our world is made up of people from all over. They speak different languages, they look differently, but at the end of the day, we do share this common boat, this common spacecraft, if you will, in the universe. So definitely perspective is very important. And I think today my keynote sort of focuses on that, about perspective and the importance of keeping the perspective, keeping a good perspective amidst the challenges that we face today in our work. So today, I think my message is think about how to turn these challenges into opportunities. Teachers are incredibly adaptive, incredibly forward thinking, and you have already done this in many cases, or are doing in the process of doing it. Yet teachers, at the end of the day, what drives us is the love of those we teach, of that which we teach. So we overcome challenges. And this is my message today is about turning challenges into opportunity. How do we do that? And I'm going to give sort of a broad message, but I think this broad message has meaning to various levels. So as I send this out to you, I just want to kind of prepare your mind to receive the message. And when you're thinking about it, think about your own work personally. Think about the work of your district, your school, of your state, of our nation, and of course of our world. So think about it on these different levels. That's really what we're talking about here is, there's a perspective perspectives on our work. There's the classroom perspective. That's our classroom teachers. That's where the rubber hits the road. That's where real learning takes place. And so everything really revolves around supporting the classroom, or should revolve around supporting the classroom. So definitely, if you're a teacher today, I support you. I admire you, the work that you do, and I think that's where our core is. Of course, there's also the school perspective. You know, our administrators, our lead teacher leads in some respects. You know, what are we doing at the school level? How do we handle these different challenges at the school level? There's also the system. So you may work within, you know, a school system that has several schools under it with several different classrooms. So you can see how I'm building this sort of tiered thing when we think about the structure of our institutions. You think about it on these different perspectives. Of course, then there's the role that I feel in Georgia and that others feel all across the state, and that's the state perspective. So how do I work at the state level to support the schools and the classroom and the system? So everybody is working to kind of support all. And then the national perspective, you know, that's our national conferences. Those are those entities that exist at the national level, like the JNCL, that try to advocate and push for world language, global ed, multicultural competence. So these are the things that I want you to kind of keep in your brain as I begin to share here, because when it's like a picture, you know, you show a picture to someone and everyone sees something different based on their experience and the way of which they're coming from. So I know that when you present something, that it's going to have those different perspectives. Really, so what today I want to do is just kind of share, you know, how we've been working to support synergy in world language education. And when we look at that, I'm going to be looking at sort of the underlying principles of what we believe, what we strive to do. We're going to be looking at sort of how we do these things. How do we set about? How do we set sail, if you will? You know, I heard something else.
I'm sorry, Patrick. Yeah, you got muted there for a second. That was a miscue. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. I saw that and was like, oh, am I muted? I hope I'm talking to people. You know, that's the way it is in our virtual world. And I know teachers feel that way too, because many of them are teaching via Zoom. And sometimes they might say, well, I hope that they're listening. Sometimes, you know, that feedback is not always there like we would in a regular face-to-face. But what I was saying is we're going to look at maybe these underlying principles, what we believe, how we do this, and then also we're going to take a look at how this has been working so far, perhaps, and then also the road ahead. So I think it's always important when you're on a road. Of course, you know where you came from and you know where you are, but you also hopefully have a destination. So in your own personal, professional lives, you know, and I'm talking to you as individuals now, you know where you came from, you know what you have accomplished and what you've done in the past, but you also know the current situation and how that has changed. And you also hopefully have a vision, you know, a vision for where you want to go and what you want to do, because teachers have to have vision. You know, we are the drivers. So in our classroom, we're the ones pushing the agenda to some degree. So we have to have a vision forward for where we want to go. So when I talk about today, these are kind of some broad categories, as it were, but, you know, we want to focus on some of these. So I'm just going to plow right ahead here and begin to share some things. And of course, I welcome, if you have questions, you know, we're going to have a time for questions afterwards. So maybe just jot them down or write them or text yourself. Sometimes I text myself all the time. So I get everybody has their own ways for keeping themselves informed and going forward. But let's start with vision. I think vision is building the as yet unseen on top of that which is already visible. So and I look at this in my own personal journey. And so as I relate my personal journey, I want you to think about your personal journey. But when I came to the Department of Ed in Georgia, it was really wide open. There was no one that said, this is your role, this is what you're going to do. You know, a lot of times if you show up in a school They may give you the curriculum and they have things to help guide you. In some situations, you may not have all that. But I think the biggest thing is to be engaged, be authentic, be flexible. In our world now, if we hadn't learned it before, we're learning it now to be flexible and to adapt to changing situations. Being there is important, being here, being together, even if it's virtual, even now, even though we can't gather together as a group of people, it's nevertheless important for us to build these regular engagements for us to stay connected and to stay supported. Be vulnerable. I say, don't be afraid to be vulnerable, because it's in vulnerability a lot of times that great progress is made. Realizing your limitations, realizing and owning your mistakes when they happen. So just be real and also be bold, because that's really, I think, all of these things are super important in the work that I've done. And I know that they're super important in the work that you're doing in your classrooms, at your schools, in your districts. I also think that I've learned that opportunity is not linear. So that means that opportunity, a lot of times we make plans, and of course, great, we all make plans, and we need plans, because remember, vision is important. So to cast a vision, you have to have sort of a vision and then a roadmap to get there. But just remember that the straight line really doesn't exist. There's a lot of, I used to write poetry at one point, looking at nature, you rarely see a straight line. So in our lives, those are seldom straight too, and even in our teaching. So let's not be a slave to the straight line, but be prepared to take that detour, to go off path if we need to work around things. Flexibility is key. So when I think about my work and I think about your work, just think about opportunity is not always so direct. Sometimes opportunity is just off the path you're on. And then I say these things, serve to lead. The best leaders I know, the best leaders in the classroom, the best leaders in the school, the best leaders at the district or state level, they are servants first. And, we are to serve. As teachers, we are servants. We have the heart of a servant. And I want you to know that servants lead, and that having that heart doesn't mean that you are less a leader than anyone else. You serve, and through your service, you lead. And then I talk about loving and leaning. So what I mean is, love those that are put in your care, love those that you work with, and lean forward, leaning to grow. I want to see a body in motion. I want to see a district in motion. I want to see a classroom in motion. We want to lean forward into the future, regardless of the challenges that come toward us. We lean into that because it shows a readiness to do it. It shows the drive of a teacher. We can't stay passive in today's world. Our kids need leaders. They need our sustainability. They need our stability. So don't be afraid to lean into those roles as you're called on to do. We never stop learning as teachers, and it's through learning and through that desire that we grow. So don't lose your passion for what you're doing. Don't lose your passion for the work and the importance of what you're doing. And the other thing I'd say is partner and provide. So find your partners, find helpers in the work. No man is an island. No woman, nobody is alone. We are together. We are in this place, this virtual world today. We are together in this virtual space together because we realize the importance of being partners in the work. That's why you join foreign language associations. And whether you're in Maryland or Georgia, all of these together are also leaning forward together. These days, in the internet world, whether it be Twitter or Facebook, so many of those lines are blurred. We can support each other now in great ways. In the midst of all this challenge, I challenge you to find the opportunity there, because it does exist. And if our heart is in the right place, if we want to serve, no matter what the experience is around us, we will find the means to do that. And we provide, partner, so we can provide more. In your schools, partner together, support one another, you can provide more through that interaction. You know, a lot of times I came to the Department of Ed, and I tell this story often. Sometimes it wasn't, hey, here's the best thing they did for me at the Department of Ed was not give me a map and say, here's your deployment. They basically said, welcome to the DOE. Let us know if you have any questions, and then let me sort of determine by interacting with the field where I need to go. You know, as teachers, that's critical. You know, we can have the best lesson plan in the world, and it can all go out the window if something happens. So a lot of times you can't, it's always good to have vision, but don't be afraid to let the field determine your deployment. And that's sort of a military style way of writing that. But what I've is just when you come in and your classroom comes in, that's when you're working. So then you base what you're going to do on that. So just remember to always be flexible enough to adapt to the situation, whatever that might be. And don't come in with all the time pre-thoughts about what it will be. Be willing to change if you have to, because a lot of times, if you think about it, the best leaders are those that can sort of handle the things that go off path. If everything goes according to plan, you know, leaders are in the back seat because that's what, you know, everybody knows. But it's when things get a little bit on topsy-turvy or whatever, that's when real leaders step forward, whether it be in the classroom, whether it be at the district level or the state level. The other thing I try to do is bridge gaps, you know, bridging gaps between students, systems, between levels, and trying to build quality and equity in all that I do. So when you're in the classroom, think about what is the quality and how do I do what I can to ensure an equity of access to that? How do I bridge the gaps that my students have, whether they be socioeconomic, cultural, whether they be just knowledge gaps? How do we bridge all that? And then I say promoting family ties. I always tell our teachers in Georgia that we are a family, and I really believe that. And it's important to promote that. I know the value of family. I know the value of having a supportive structure, as many of you do, and the people you rely on when things get tough, or likewise when you want to share something great. So connecting with local wisdom is very important. Connecting with those around you. You might feel like you're in an island, but you have this different levels of support that are out there, whether they're another fellow teacher, a supervisor, another teacher in a different district. So I think that's something that I've seen here in our current challenges. It's just how teachers have come together to support one another. And I always say, be in the big and the small, because both matter. At the end of the day, yes, the big thoughts matter, but you should never be so busy that you're not able to take time to spend with the smallest of your students who need assistance. So just remember that being there for everyone. So not just those that sometimes we pay the most attention. All right, so how do we build communication, outreach, and advocacy? I think, we utilize our tools. Many of you are already learning a lot about tools you never knew before, because you have to, because that's the reality of your situation. But when I think about communicating, how do we drive world language? How do we drive more attention to world language? Well, we got to utilize the tools that are there. This is the day and age we live in, where every person, every one of you is their own radio station, their own television, their own thing. So you have the capability, because you're logging in today and you can see my face and you can hear my voice. I know that you have the capability to reach the world with your message. So use those tools. Use those tools in your classroom. Use those tools to advocate for more language support for our students who are coming from everywhere and going everywhere. So I always tell people, don't put my students in a box and think, oh, they're just going to work in the United States. we never know, or that they'll only work in this language. The world is really wide open for them. And I think that's a byproduct a little bit of this situation we're in, is we're realizing just how valuable communication is. And I think we'll come through this even more communicative with each other, because now we are being using these tools. Everybody's using these tools. So we're going to realize just how important it is to connect with others and how important that role is. So I think there's some really dynamic things happening in this point in time that we really don't understand completely yet, but utilize your tools, utilize those things. I always think about simplifying my processes. You know, as a teacher, you do this instinctively. You try not to overcomplicate things because you know you'll lose kids that way. You have to really think about, as a teacher, how do I get this message across clear? You know, what do I have to do? And at the state level, that same thing is happening, right? So those same tools are valuable. How do we simplify our message, simplify our processes to make it easy? And a lot of people might say, well, you know, we oversimplify things. Things are complicated. That's true. Not everything's a slogan. I know that to be true. But simplifying processes and things like that help us to really encapsulate what we're doing and move on. So these are, I think, important. I also think it's about finding the right balances. So I've introduced some things that we do. You know, we do world language updates. We have a website, we have internal, we have a calendar that's running. We do guidance at a glance documents. These are all things that I've done at the state level, but they relate to the classroom as well. You know, finding the right balance of communication with your parents, finding the right balance of communication with your students. How do I simplify my processes to make them understandable and easy for my audience? So everything that I'm doing at the state level is relatable at the classroom level. So let's make sure that we think about that. And think about communication that goes laterally and vertically. So by that, I mean, vertically is within our area. Vertically is within our classroom, our students, our parents. That's a vertical, that's our world. Laterally means connecting with those outside of our world. So that means connecting with those perhaps that are related. One of the great things that we've been able to do is to make such a valuable cross-section of partners all across Georgia, really, and in many cases throughout the Southeast. But that's because our lateral communication is just as important as our vertical. So when you're in your work, think about your vertical, that is the direct stakeholders that you're involved in, but think about how you're communicating also laterally with all of those who are potential to partner with you, because they cannot support you if they don't know what you're doing. And you have to kind of sell that a little bit. So there's a lot of that going on in today's world. And making the personal connection, I think, is really important. Talking with parents personally or with students personally, you know, taking time to talk. We're in an incredibly busy time. And I know that not all of you have time for everything, and that's true. But I think we can and must never forget that we must take time to be personal. We must take time to connect with individuals, even among ourselves. You know, teachers, we're super busy. I might not have time to take or feel like I have time to help another. But it is really important that we not get enclosed within our own worlds, and that we reach out and connect with other teachers. We support other teachers. We build structures that make it possible for teachers to talk with each other and support each other. That's really important. And, you know, be responsive to the community you serve. That's my job. You know, I serve the state of Georgia. I serve stakeholders, but I will say primarily and unabashedly, I support teachers. So taking time to be responsive to them is really important. In your work in the classroom, take time to be responsive. I know it's a work. Your work is, you know, being a teacher, I've found, was maybe never easy per se, but it was always rewarding. And one thing that drove me through 23 years was just that idea that it was more something fun for me to do rather than work to some degree. And I know that there were so many days where it was work, the weekends I spent grading papers, the things that we do, that's all work. But just be sure that you're taking care of yourself and aligning your goals and your messaging, keeping a kind of thing, think about the bigger picture, where there is no vision, the people perish. So trying to align your vision for your classroom, or our vision for our district, or our vision for our state or nation, that's part of that synergy. The better we get at aligning our goals and messaging, then it's not just one voice, but many voices aligned under the same banner. Now, they may all vary to some degree, but we have power in that we are cohesive and that our message is reaching those and reaching more people. Advocacy is super important. So building collaboration and connectivity is super important as well. So coming together is the beginning, keeping together is progress, but really working together is success. So how do we facilitate structures that help us work together toward success? And I know, as sure as I'm talking to you now, within a school, there might be several personalities within a department. And sometimes there are disagreements, but it's super vital that we foster some sort of basic level of working and synergistic togetherness, because that will help us in our work. Building supportive teams for social, emotional support for teachers, but also for the work that we do. Building teams in your classroom to support the work of students, building structures. Think about that. What can I do to build supportive structures within my school or within my classroom that will help my students or my fellow teachers? What can we do? When I was a teacher, thing I did was very, in German, we have something called a Stammtisch. So it's a table that we all sit around. So we started on the weekends getting together at a Stammtisch and just chatting as teachers and outside of the school situation. I realized that maybe in this virtual world that might not be possible, but maybe a virtual meeting or some sort of supportive structures, what can we do? And I always would say, don't let the field determine your deployment. Don't come into a situation and think this template is going to work for everything. Templates are just that, general. They can be adjusted. So thinking about your work, how do I build structures that do these things? And try to identify and connect people at all levels, vertically and laterally. So the more you can do to connect people, both to the message and to the work that you're doing, the better that will build that synergy. And if you think about, rotation is so important to life. Our Earth rotates, and that's very important for life on this planet. Our galaxy rotates. I don't know if you've ever thought about this, but the rotating aspect of life is super important. So in your classrooms, keep that in mind, that you're constantly in motion, constantly rotating, but you're rotating around something central. So what are the central points in your classroom that your work revolves around? What, as individuals, what are those tenets, those precepts that you have that you revolve around as an educator? Identifying those, and if you build on those, you'll increase the gravity. And on a larger scale, talking about marketing and talking about messaging, the more we can do, the more players we have that revolve, and the better we get at connecting around our central critical issues, the more momentum we build up for those issues, and the more likely that something will change, that we will influence change. I always say, when I'm working in my classroom or I'm working at the Department of Ed, the important thing is to anchor and then stretch. So we never want to go so far that it's not anchored to some need. I never want to create something that's not based upon a need that I see in the reality that is before me. So when I'm thinking about structures, I try to think about what are my needs and what are the stretches I can start to try that might help to meet that need. And then with every stretch, we grow, and then the next stretch happens. So in your own work, how is it that what are the needs in your classroom? What are the things you're going to do instructionally? What are the things you're going to do socio-emotional that are going to help those situations? As I said, we are bodies in motion. Our planet is a body in motion. So we are not stagnant. That means that we're constantly adapting. That's what good teachers do. We're always in motion. We're leaning forward. We're leaning forward into a possible solution. It doesn't mean that every stretch will be successful, but I think we always have to be willing to stretch ourselves emotionally, stretch ourselves in terms of context and what we physically do. Or maybe we've really had to stretch a lot. Our teachers are really growing a lot, having to figure out, how do I do these things in a virtual environment? You've stretched a lot, probably. So I know that, and that's where growth really happens too. With challenge and with the stretching to meet that challenge, you also discover new things about yourself. You also discover things about others. Share your view, foster clarity of understanding. That's what you work for. You work for sharing a message. You're sharing something. When you stand in front of your classroom, you are sharing many things. You're not only sharing the content that you prepared, you're sharing about yourself. You're also sharing humanity with them. You're also sharing compassion. So support innovation. Don't be afraid to innovate. Innovation is what changes. That's where change happens. That's where growth happens. It's that stretch, it's like a rubber band that pulls you forward. It pulls you forward by its own. If your vision is forward, then that rubber band stretches back to where you are, and its inertia will move you forward. If you have vision forward, then if this vision is where I am, this is my reality. As long as I have vision, and imagine the rubber band stretch between my fingers. If I move this finger, it stretches my reality forward as well. So make sure that you're doing that. Building leadership and collaborations at the regional level. Think about, you're at the state level now. It's so critical for these structures to exist. Our foreign language associations all across these United States, super critical. But what can we do within a smaller part of that? Or what can we do with other states? How can we collaborate? That's why things like NACESFL or NADSFL or these other national ACTFL, all of these national organizations are so important as well. Feed the dream and provide momentum. That goes to so many levels. For the individual student in your classroom, what are you doing to feed their dream? How are you going to build momentum if you don't feed their dreams? So how are we going to provide momentum? It comes by growing this dream that we have for where we want our classrooms to be, where we want our students to be. So just think about that a little bit. Honoring, supporting, and connecting the team. That's what we're doing here today. You're honoring teachers it's important that we honor our teachers. It's important that we support one another. It's important that we connect with one another. And that doesn't even hold just within our state. It means nationally. We have the ability today. We are connected here on this little magical internet connection, and yet we can support each other in that environment. So it's really amazing. I'm going to kind of wrap things up here a little bit. I know I've talked a lot. I know it's sort of maybe a big picture idea, but maybe that's the idea of a keynote, is it's supposed to bring a big picture and some thoughts. So building concentration and consensus. You can do what I cannot do. I can do what you cannot do. Together, we can do great things. So we have to realize that none of us can do it by ourselves. So connecting and building concentration, building consensus, stepping forward together, respecting and knowing what everyone's role is. How do we support each other? The better we get at that, the more our progress will be. We create ecosystems. We have our people we reach out to. you have a problem. You have a support system. You have perhaps, excuse me, a support system for when you're dealing with an issue, right? Or, okay, I had a really bad day. I need to talk to my friend here, my teacher who also gets it and understands. Build your ecosystem of support, build those to help you. We have to bring talent, resources, and efforts to bear. At the state level, I think about that. We have to bring talent. When I talk about, that's a lot of what I do. We have a statewide world language job fair, and the whole idea behind that is to bring the talent together with the resources so that we can fill classrooms with talented teachers and that we can grow. One thing I quickly learned in this role is that we cannot grow without securing the means to grow. That means if you're thinking of it from a plant perspective, you need water, you need nutrients. So we need to do that for our teachers. If we want to grow our teachers, we have to support them at the roots. If we want to see that blossom at the end of the day in the spring, we have to do a lot of work on the soil ahead of time. So a lot of times when we think about how do we build, we have to think about it from the whole plant perspective, if I can continue that analogy. We can't just focus on the roots. We can't just focus, but there is a hierarchy. So building it up, the roots super important. The laying of the land is very important. Any gardener will tell you this. So that's really important lesson as well. We need to connect what we're doing. We need to connect what we're doing nationally, locally, and state. And, part of my work is to try to maintain this bridge between policy and practice. That's what I do. I try to relay the messages from the field up and also up down. So it's an interesting perspective, but within your school, you're also a bridge, right? We're all bridges. You are the bridge between the public and your students. You're also the bridge from your students to, the administration. So there's all kinds of bridges that are being done there. So how do we maintain those? What can we do to secure them? Sharing and being sure to celebrate your successes. Share your resources. Share. Now, one of the great things or side effects I've seen from this whole situation is just the great ability of our teachers, the willingness to share. And you guys know, because you've seen it, and whether it's on Pinterest or whatever it may be, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, there's some great teachers sharing great things with each other. That's how we improve. That's how we get stronger. That's that synergy I'm talking about. But here it is in the role of resources. How do we build greater synergy and sharing of resources that will help us all? And finally, let me close with the road ahead here, because I see my time is getting short. And I'm just going to quickly wrap up here. We need to secure the foundation for the future. We need to continue to build capacity, continue to work on structures that build capacity, that build partnerships within the school, as a school level, thinking about how do I build capacity? How do I build an environment where partnering is encouraged and where it happens and where people can support each other? We got to be responsive. We have to be adaptive, guys. We have to be adaptive. If there's nothing we've learned in the last 6 months, it's probably that. And we have to flow with the currents. Fighting the current, that's exhausting. So trying to find a way to stay adaptive to the currents that are out there and staying responsive and connected, I think, is a super challenge, but something we need to do. And look for opportunities. In the midst of challenge, there are many opportunities, perhaps even more so than in a stable world. So if you think of the instability that we have, that's also an opportunity to lead. This is what business people think of, right? So these are, there's a lot of opportunity in the business community for those that have the vision to see it. There's also opportunity in the educational world for those that can see it. And then your urgency and passion must always be there. I hope in this last few minutes I've been able to bring across some of the passion that I have for the work that I do. And I know that you're all equally as passionate. And there's also urgency in the work that we do because we know it's incredibly important. And I think I'm kind of right at time. I don't want to be, I think I'm going to stop sharing at this point and maybe take some questions.
Patrick and participants, this is Kim Banks. I'm a member of the Maryland Foreign Language Association Board, and it's my pleasure to first of all thank you for the inspiring message that you've shared with all of us this morning. We do have several questions that came through the chat as you were presenting. And I'd like to start with this one. It is, you mentioned a statewide language job fair. Can you elaborate on that event? Who is it for? Who organizes it, etc.?
So one of the great questions. So one of the things that I've challenged is if I want to grow programs in the state of Georgia, I have to create opportunities for systems and talent to come together. So what I saw was a gap, really. I saw a gap between connecting the systems with the talent. So what we did was we created a statewide job fair, which is an actual physical event we had this year in February. It actually is in February. So this year it might be virtual, of course, like everything else, we turned virtual for the moment. But what we did was we created basically a nexus, and we said to the world, and this is through communication, we said we are holding a job fair. We want systems that have openings for foreign language teachers to come to this job fair, and we want those looking. So we want to connect talent and opportunity together. And the first year we did it, we may have had 15 systems that joined, that actually participated. The second year we did it, we had about 40 systems that joined. And this last year, we had over 60 systems that joined. So one of the reasons that when you make a stretch, remember in your classroom, I talked about anchoring, stretching. So when I think about stretching, I think about stretching to meet a need. My need was I need to have more world language teachers. I need to connect talent with that. So the stretch was to create a statewide world language job fair. And the reason when you know a stretch is successful is when people come and you see it grow and you say, okay, that now I'm going to stretch a little bit further each year. So each year we're adding new things. So we now have university partners that come on board to share about endorsement programs that they're offering. So trying to create this nexus, if you will, where we can put talent together with opportunity. And that was basically easier than you might think, because systems need help, schools need help, teachers also need help. It's interesting to some degree, though. You might have a teacher with one system looking at another system. So sometimes that there is a point at which you have to be careful, but it was a great event, and we continue to do that. It was a great event.
Patrick,
Great.
Thank you so much for sharing those details with us. Milvia Hernandez is going to ask you the next question.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Patrick, for that wonderful presentation too, and inspirational words, right? Another colleague have a question. How do you get administration to stop looking at bottom line, money, and understanding proving curriculum cost money?
It's an excellent question, and it's a constant battle with people who look at only dollar signs sometimes, right? So I think the overall, what we do is our message is proficiency. So how do we drive proficiency? We drive proficiency with dedicated teachers interacting with students who are highly qualified, who have the tools and are supported. So if you want a watered down level of proficiency, then this is what you're going to get. And I think it's about matching expectations with the reality. So for administrators, my conversations with them are always, well, what is your end goal? Do you want your students to be able to speak in another language? Do you want them to be able to achieve the seal of biliteracy, which in Georgia is intermediate high? So if you want these goals, you're going to have to dedicate resources to get it. It's about priorities. So I think it's just making sure they understand that they get what you pay for. Yes, I can get a cheaper mailbox, but I might have to replace it in 2 years. Yes, you can do a watered down version of world language, but let's be realistic about what you're getting for that. And you're going to get feedback from your parents because they're going to realize it too. And at the end of the day, you're going to decide after you wasted all that money on a watered down version, if you'd have just put a quality version in place at the start, then you would have good feedback and you'd have good support. So I think, and realizing, hey, money is restricted, right? So there's always several pots it has to go in, but let's be realistic. I'd rather do something smaller well than something larger that is less meaningful. That said, all world language opportunities are important, because then I started to think about this global education thing. It's larger than language. The work that we do is larger than language. So getting people to understand that is super critical. So there is a base level of global education that we need all students to have. But if language proficiency is a cut above that, right? Because proficiency comes with effort, it comes through practice, it comes through time. It's a little bit harder to reach that, but we can reach a level of global. So this is where I think about in my work is, what is the expectations? What is your goal as a district or school? What are your parents wanting from you? So build a quality program that meets those needs. And if you build something, you're going to replace it in 2 years if it's not well done, right? So just keep those in mind. I don't know, it is a passionate argument with supervisors. So of course, I'm a strong advocate for that. And they may or may not like what I say, but I say it anyway.
Yeah, definitely. And I also have one more question here. What do you suggest to those who may be line goals and messaging, but may not be heard, having the message and knowledge?
So it's about, how do I get my word out? How do I acknowledge? So I think one thing is persistence, and the other is lateral thinking. So sometimes, if you watch water, for example, water hits a barrier, and what's the first thing water does? It moves to the left or right. It looks for a way around the barrier. So I think a lot of ways messaging is like that. And another way you can do is increase the quantity. So, I think what we do is we provide quality and quantity to try to have a steady flow that heads downstream. And no matter what walls are built in front of us, our message is going to get through. A portion of it will get through. So I think we all face obstacles. We all face those things. Every obstacle is an opportunity in many ways. So learn from those, whatever those obstructions may be. Part of it is tact. You got to know when to press and when not. When to press the accelerator and when to keep your foot off it. So being tactful is also super important when it comes to advocacy. So I think in general sense, that's what I'd say. More specifics per case.
People are getting active now, getting into questions. I got one more here, and okay. Do you think language instructors should be involved in global education?
Absolutely, because global education, it's like that's the baseline of what you do. If you think about it, that's the baseline of what you do. Yes, we want language proficiency, but we want our students to be globally aware. We want them to know that people exist all around the planet. Again, on this little blue marble, we are all sailing together. So whether they speak a different language, they look differently than I do, sometimes they hold different beliefs than I do. At the end of the day, we share a house together. So it's important that there is a baseline of global realization for students. Sometimes in rural districts, it's really a challenge sometimes, but the opportunity today is more expanded in many ways than it ever has been. Today, online, I can sell to the world from as long as I have an internet connection, wherever that is. So, I mean, the connectivity is there for everyone, and that is actually helping. But we are globally connected, and anyone who doesn't believe that just has to look at the clothes they're wearing or the food they're eating to realize that. You know, we cannot live in fish bowls. We have to understand that we're connected.
Yes, yes. Okay. Kim, you want to read the next one, or you want me to continue? We got two more here.
Sure.
Great.
I'll ask the next question, Patrick. It's related to the seal you have in Georgia in addition to the seal of biliteracy. Can you tell us about how your state's International Skills Diploma seal has been received by the broader community, including businesses and other employers?
It's been really well received, and it goes back to that base level again. So this is about and it is a direct correlation or making the direct connection between business and global skills. So having students that have received the International Skills Diploma Seal, what we're saying is that these kids have achieved a competency level on a global scale. That's important because we have companies from all over the world. I'll just share, you know, and I'm not bragging, but saying that Atlanta's GDP is greater than 30 states by itself. So this powerful economic engine that is there is driven by people from all over the world. There are companies in your backyard doing things that were made in other places. They ship, we bring in, we are the mouth of the South, you know, to some degree. Actually, that's related. That's a wrestling term. Anyway, you know, so we are connected. And I think, yeah, it's the International Skills Diploma Seal is about recognizing students that have achieved this. And we have been very successful at getting our business community on. Is their advocacy connected with ours that put it in place? And so, and I think it's super important that we hold we did this year because we couldn't hold an in-person celebration. We did a virtual celebration with our ISDS graduates. But I think the program strikes at the beginnings of a sort of a global competency, whether we call it certificate or seal or whatever. But again, it's about, here's language proficiency. That's specific, but global competency is something all students should possess because we live in a global world. You know, we're online in a global environment. Your kids talk and play online with people from all over the world, right?
And Patrick, for those audience members and participants who might not be familiar with the curriculum requirements to earn the Georgia International Skills Diploma Seal, would you be able to share what some of those are?
Absolutely.
In addition, I know that, for instance, that seal in particular requires students to have at least 3 credits in the same world language and/or ESOL. And perhaps you could speak a little bit to the international focus that is required for that seal.
Absolutely. So yes, at least three, we call it a pathway completer in Georgia. That's a student who has completed 3 courses in the same subject area. So being a pathway completer in a language is super important because we want you to have a baseline understanding of language, and really the encouragement is beyond the base. So the base is 2 for foreign language credit going to university. You know, you want 2 years of a foreign language, but we want you to really extend that. We want you to go to 3rd or 4th. So we're encouraging higher level language. So your Spanish 3s, your Spanish 4s, your APs. But also, we have within our course catalog, what we've done is taken a look at our entire course catalog in Georgia, and we have determined which of those courses have an international focus. So we are encouraging kids to take courses that are globally focused, that have a global connection. And those run across all content areas. Easy ones like world history, yes, that's a global focus, but also science, also ROTC courses that we have. So we really look at an evaluation of the course itself and what they're teaching, the content within it, and we determine which one of those are qualify. So selection of those courses, but we also have to be careful in crafting that because you have rural and you have urban schools. Urban schools are going to have more opportunity for a broader range of courses, but we also want it to be accessible to a student in a rural part of Georgia who may not have access. So we try to build that place. There are the world history that's available in every school, world geography, things like that, and then there are those more specific. And then also we require community service, because we believe in thinking globally and acting locally. So having community service that has some sort of global context, multicultural fairs, things that are going on, your honor societies, things like that. And then also they have to do a capstone presentation, which means they have to go before a board at the school in the spring and then basically tell what having this globally focused curriculum means to them. And we have on our website some of that captured for you. Or a lot of times if you go to YouTube, simply type in International Skills Diploma Seal, you'll see some of the videos students have made to explain what the focus and what the seal means to them. These are kids who are interested in international, being involved in international business, being involved in diplomacy. These are kids who are already at the high school. We are identifying who have this global focus, a vision for what they want to do and where they want to go.
There's one more question. Let me put my video because I'm here. Somebody asked, do you have suggestions on the best way for new language teacher to build the connections and support system that you describe as essential for successful teaching?
Sure. So the first thing as a new teacher, I think, when I relate this to my own experience. I was a new program specialist. So how do we do this? So I think the first thing is just to get the lay of the land, right? So what's happened? Where are the people there? So if I'm a new teacher, who do I connect to? So there's different levels, right? There's school, there's state, there's other outside of that. So cultural entities exist in Georgia. So connecting with the cultural community in your community, wherever you are, what are the cultural organizations with whom you can connect? What are the opportunities that exist? It's almost a local thing. I would say, as a general rule, think about your environment. Where are the places? Who are the potential candidates? How do I form with others to try to do it together? I'll just share with you an example, like on a personal, as a German teacher. So I wanted my students to have experience working for a German company. So what I did in the county I was working with at the time was I actually just went around to the companies that were there and I said, hey, I'm a local German teacher. I've got students, blah, blah, and would like to figure out how we can connect. So sometimes it's a local, sometimes it's broader, but I think, that's back to that quote of let the field determine your deployment. So be like water and run where you find the most open doors. So thinking about that, and I'm sorry that it's in a general sense, but that's what's coming to me right now is because I don't know the specifics of your situation, but just connecting, looking for opportunities to think about how we can connect together. And today, within your system, within your district, there might be, maybe part of that is building consensus, coming together with those that are part of it. So what can we do together? Those are my general comments right now.
Patrick, on behalf of the Maryland Foreign Language Association Board and all of the participants this morning, we do want to thank you so much for broadening our perspectives as we consider our roles and what we can do for the greater good.